George, you call this a report card. What kind of marks is these? How you gonna go to college with a marks like these?
I don't want to go to college, Pop. I want to go to the Navy.
The Navy?
Yeah, you know, the Navy. You can sail the 7 seas, you can put your mind at ease.
Don't quote the Finnish people at me, boy. It's 1940.
1940, so 46 years later in 1986, Rodney Dangerfield is going to have a college freshman son?
In 1986, he's gonna be 65. Why you have a children so late?
I don't know, but the mother is going to be dead, so maybe giving birth to a child is what killed her.
Jesus Christ, that's awfully dark for a light comedy.
Well, something needs to be dark, because it won't be the cast. This is one of the whitest movies since Dead Poets Society, and that hasn't even come out yet. Do Caucasian filmmakers honestly think no black people go to college? I know Jaws thinks they don't go to the beach, and Woody Allen thinks they don't go to Manhattan, but come on! This picture is so white, I can't believe John Hughes wasn't involved.
If you're gonna bring up Woody Allen, then you should have known this Rodney Dangerfield is a Jewish, and his son in the movie, Keith Gordon, is a too. They both are playing Italians, so there is some color in this movie.
How does being Jewish add color to this film?
You know, Jews. They are the black people of the white people.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't care. It make me laugh, so we keeping it in. Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast looks at old movies and asks, does it still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Romaka, and today we're discussing Back to School from 1986 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com on Facebook or on Twitter. Please tell your friends about us and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch, just like our patrons did for this Patron's Choice episode, and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/dtswpod. Now, Joe, take us back to 1986.
Since this movie is about going to college, let's look at what colleges were up to in 1986. George, you'll be happy to know a lot of what goes on at universities and schools today went on in 1986, like mass shootings.
Why would I be happy to know that?
Here is an article from 1986 by the New York Times. Read the headline, please.
5 in Brooklyn shot at college. Student is held.
Why'd you read it that way?
I don't know, it's in Brooklyn.
Okay. A student at New York City Technical College shot and killed a laboratory technician at the school. This murderer also shot several people in that financial aid office. I don't name people only famous for murder, but this dude appears to have had years of mental illness. He supposedly shot these people because he was going to be denied financial aid. You might have already guessed he got his guns out of town. This is why state-level gun control doesn't work. You need it at the federal level. So people who are banned from owning one in New York City can't head over to Pennsylvania and bring one back. It's not that if guns are outlawed, only criminals will have guns. If guns are outlawed, then guns will be fucking outlawed. You ever try buying something that's outlawed? It's not as easy as buying a bus ticket and going to a neighboring state to get it. I can assure you.
What were you trying to buy?
Let's move on. College students weren't just shooting people in 1986. They were also trying to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. Give us this headline from the AP, George.
2 college students rescued after aborted Niagara Falls stunt. They wouldn't be allowed to do that today.
Why not?
Well, they can't abort a falls stunt.
2 Niagara University students planned to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. At the last minute, they thought, hey, this is a bad idea. Sadly, they only came to that realization when they got into the water. They had to hold on to a rock for dear life for over an hour as the rushing current pummeled them before park police could get them out. The barrel they were going to use, made of fiberglass and aluminum, did go over. It was smashed beyond recognition, as no doubt they would have been. Luckily for them, they survived to be charged with disorderly conduct, among other things. The article mentions the Coast Guard could have additional charges for them. George, during your service in the Navy, were you involved in any sort of situations where your ship had to rescue anyone?
I personally was not, but we did have to rescue people. They were our people when one of the planes went over the edge.
Oh.
There's a video of it on YouTube.
Oh, you showed me this.
Yeah.
So this was not your area, so you wouldn't be involved in the rescue, but you were on the ship.
Right. Exactly that.
Okay. Did they have fun going over, or were they upset about it?
I didn't take the time to interview them about it, Joe. I would assume they were scared.
Huh. Well, they knew they were going to get rescued, so I was like, oh, how exciting.
So what happened was the plane came in for a landing, and it caught its arresting cable, but the arresting cable snapped. So when the pilot was expecting his multi-million-dollar armed aircraft to be stopping, it wasn't stopping. That would scare me if I was the one thinking, oh, my thing should be stopping now.
Still, an exciting moment in his life, I'm sure. I bet he still talks about it. It would be a he, right?
Almost certainly.
Anyway, I think the guy would have had a nice time. I'm sure it's something he talked about endlessly with all his friends. So anyway, back to this. Drinking is the only drug of choice used in this film, but that's hardly the only drug available on a college campus. This headline from the Washington Post provides an example. Read it, George.
1/3 of college students try cocaine, survey finds.
According to this survey, sponsored by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, other drugs like marijuana had declined, but coke was up. I was in college at this time. I never saw anybody do cocaine. I'm sure it was happening. I just never saw it.
You were never cool enough to be in those crowds.
I was never cool enough to be in those crowds.
Me neither, just for the record.
Those are definitely doing weed, I can tell you that. And not as good as the stuff we have today. This is also 1986, so there was the crack moral panic going on. While college students got cocaine headlines, if this article was on poor black people, it would have been about crack use among the urban or inner city savages. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but not by much. Okay, George, tell us about Back to School.
All right. This was directed by Alan Metter.
Metter? I never touched her.
Heyo.
I've never seen this guy's other movies, but in 1978, I did see a TV special he wrote called Steve Martin, a Wild and Crazy Guy. I can't remember anything of the special except I know that's when he wore, Steve Martin that is, his white suit and had a fake arrow through his head.
A classic Steve Martin bit.
Indeed. That was classic Steve Martin. It was 1978.
Mm-hmm. This was written by Steve Kampman, William Porter, and Dennis Snee.
I think I knew this back in 1986 when this picture came out and haven't thought about it in years, but Stephen Kampman played a supporting character on Newhart, a show I watched. Why, I don't know, since it was another show that didn't think black people or any people of color existed. But in any case, he played Kirk Devane, a character who would introduce himself this way. Hi, I'm Kirk Devane. I'm a pathological liar. That's a lie. Which made me laugh, but I guess nobody else because they wrote his character out of the show after 2 years.
You know, we've been doing this show for long enough. I just started watching The Golden Girls again.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 2 has 2 black people in it, which that's amazing for that. Like, I was impressed. They literally don't speak. They are background. But they're present at Dorothy's daughter's wedding.
Mm. Well, I told you about the Golden Girls. For some reason, the kids only visit when they get married and then promptly disappear from the show for the rest of the series. Very strange.
First episode, they had a gay housekeeper.
Yes.
/ cook.
Well, flamboyantly gay and stereotypical. Yep.
And by the second episode, he's gone.
And not even mentioned again.
Yep.
Steve also wrote for WKRP in Cincinnati and SCTV. Likely, I also saw him on episodes of LA Law. I presume you've never heard of one show I just mentioned, have you, George?
I've heard of WKRP in Cincinnati. We've mentioned it a number of times.
Okay. Oh, so you only know it from me, but you've never actually seen it.
No.
Nah, okay. That's what I thought.
You sound so, like, smug about that. Like, dude, I'm just younger than you. That's all that happened. Did you ever watch the cartoon Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea?
I did not.
Okay, then.
Okay, William Porter, as I was saying. He also wrote for Newhart, and he wrote for Mork and Mindy. That's all I got on him.
Nanu Nanu.
Nanu Nanu. Oh, very good. I'm glad you knew that. Well, you're a Robin Williams fan, so I guess that shouldn't be a surprise. And Dennis Snee, he wrote for The Simpsons, Third Rock from the Sun, Empty Nest, the Golden Girls spinoff nobody seems to remember happened, even though it ran for 7 years. He also wrote for In Living Color, Family Matters, Mr. Belvedere, Babes, and The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. That's a lot for me to have seen, so apparently I thought he was the funniest of these guys, I guess.
So for awards, not much. It was nominated for a MTV Video Music Award for Best Video from a Film for Rodney Dangerfield, Twist and Shout.
A year earlier in the movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Ferris sings Twist and Shout. And the actress who plays Secretary Marge Stillwater in this movie also played a secretary in Ferris Bueller. So I'm guessing this movie is an alternative universe of that movie, and she is the only being who exists in both universes.
So for blurbs, IMDb says, to help his discouraged son get through college, a fun-loving and obnoxious rich businessman decides to enter the school as a student himself. HBO says, Rodney Dangerfield turns higher education into a textbook case of lowbrow laughs in this riotous comedy. Fuck you, HBO.
That's a rather strong response.
They're trying too hard. They're like trying to sell it. I have an expectation of blurbs. A blurb should give you an idea of what you're about to see, not try to sell you on it. Speaking of which, Amazon says, in order to encourage his freshman son, an uneducated self-made millionaire enrolls in college. The only part I take issue with is the whole idea of a self-made anything ever.
Okay, but other than that, it's
a good blurb. So characters. We'll start with the Mellons. And starting with the Mellons, we have Thornton Mellon. Like me, he managed to be successful without graduating from college. Unlike me, he didn't even graduate high school, owns a massive business, and is swimming in money. He also seems to have a natural affinity for finance, and he cares about his son, more than many fathers in comedies. For the majority of the movie, he's played by Rodney Dangerfield.
The last movie I ever saw Rodney Dangerfield in was a drama called Natural Born Killers. He made a terrific creep in that film, as I remember anyway. His other films I've seen are Caddyshack and wow, that's it. I would have thought I'd seen more, but I guess I'm thinking of his comedy specials and his late night TV interviews. I've not seen many of his movies.
Then we have his son, Jason Mellon. He is quite possibly the most boring leading guy in any movie we've seen. He's obviously smart and athletic, but gives zero fucks until his dad is around. It's like he has ADD, but physical proximity to his father works just like my Adderall. Played by Keith Gordon.
This guy has directed a lot of TV shows I've watched, like Better Call Saul and Homicide, Life on the Street. But this is the only film of his I've seen.
Then we have Vanessa. She's Thornton's wife, at least for the first half hour of the movie. Written to be as unlikable a person as can be because it makes Thornton look better. Played by Adrienne Barbeau.
No matter where I see this woman pop up, she'll always be Maud's daughter to me.
From Harold and Maude?
Maude, the TV show.
Ah, okay.
God, I forget what a child you are. Anyway, yes, Maude was a TV show, spinoff of All in the Family, you see. And Maude spun off Good Times. She has done a lot more than that. She was on Creep Show, The Drew Carey Show, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, and in the movies, Argo and Cannonball Run.
And she's not the only person from Star Trek Deep Space Nine in this movie.
Nope.
And then we have friends and employees of the Mellons. Start with Lou. He's Thornton's driver, masseuse, bodyguard, strongman, and anything else Thornton needs at the moment. Played by Burt Young.
I think most people know Burt Young as Rocky Balboa's sleazebag brother-in-law. But for this podcast, we last saw him in Chinatown, episode 73.
He's the first person I've seen to have almost 200 acting credits, but only 3 in the Known For showcase on IMDb. Then we have Marge Sweetwater. She's a secretary in an 80s movie. In another 80s movie. She's one of the 2 types of secretaries in 80s movies. One type is the type that could sue her boss for sexual harassment today, but back then would probably just smile and take it or even rely on it to advance her career amongst a bunch of sexist assholes. Marge is the other type, played by Edie McClurg.
We've already spoke a little about this character, so let me tell you about Edie. I have seen her in, as I said, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I also know her from the movie Van Wilder and Natural Born Killers. That movie's going to come up one more time, just like Deep Space Nine. And the TV show Malcolm in the Middle, Picket Fences, LA Law, and the previously mentioned Empty Nest.
Then we have some students. Derek Like Ducky, Spicoli, and Charles DeMar, he's another in a long line of 80s movie high school misfit sidekicks. His particular style involves hair coloring and coats with shoulder pads. You know, like a rebel. Played by Robert Downey Jr.
I said Natural Born Killers would come up again, and here it is. That movie starred Robert Downey Jr. I've also seen him in Soap Dish, Shortcuts, Wonder Boys, and that's the movie where future Iron Man bids a future Spider-Man who is being taught by a future Ant-Man. In addition to that, I've seen him in Good Night and Good Luck, Tropic of Thunder, and of course, all the Marvel movies Robert Downey Jr. appeared in, starting with Iron Man. For this podcast, we talked about the years he was in jail. I can't remember which episode that was, though, but we definitely did it.
Yes, we did. Then we have Valerie. Like Andy, Stacey Hamilton, and Monique Jeannot, she's the girl next door looking romantic interest of 90% of the penis havers and about 10% of the uterus havers in her local school district. Played by Terry Farrell.
It's Dax from Deep Space Nine. I didn't even recognize her. That's it. That's all I got. Did you recognize her?
I did.
Okay.
And then we have Chaz. I need to make sure I write these descriptions before Joe gets a chance at them, because it's hard to describe this guy as anything but what this actor plays in everything he's ever been in ever, like what Joe is about to say. Played by William Zabka.
I know. He's also the bad guy in Karate Kid, and now that character's back and played again by this actor in the TV show Cobra Kai.
He also showed up in How I Met Your Mother.
Okay, never seen it. Was he a bad guy in How I Met Your Mother?
Kind of. Then we have school faculty, starting with Dean Martin. Otis does not squeal like a pig at a newscaster in this movie. Instead, he shows us exactly how the 80s made higher education unattainable for the following generations. Played by Ned Beatty.
We've seen Ned Beatty in our 36 episode Network, in Superman episode 62, and Deliverance for episode 111. That's the squeal the pig that George is referring to. Also, Network you're also referring to.
And Superman, because I called him Otis.
Oh, right, of course.
I literally referred to all three of those movies.
By the way, did you get the Dean Martin reference? I mean, do you even know who that is?
Stop asking. Because it'll come up later.
Okay.
Then we have Philip Barbet. The dean of the business school is a British-sounding snobbish prick, but only because he's acting across from Rodney Dangerfield. Otherwise, he'd just be British. Played by Paxton Whitehead.
You know, I just realized that his real name could have been used as the character name. That would have been perfect. Paxton Whitehead. That sounds even more pompous than Philip Barbet.
And there's so many I could pop you like a zit jokes in there, too.
Yes. Mr. Paxton Whitehead has been on TV shows I've watched, including Frasier and Mad About You. And some I've mentioned previously for some other actors, but I've never seen any other movie with him in it.
And then finally, she's the opposite of Philip Barbet in a number of fundamental ways. She's also the love interest for Thornton because Valerie sure isn't. Played by Sally Kellerman.
For this podcast, we last saw her in MASH, episode number 1. That's right, she was in the first movie we ever saw for this podcast. Well, we ever saw and pinned online. She was also in the first movie we hated for this podcast. MASH is a great TV show and one shit movie.
2 votes. All right, getting into the plot. It's not important, but I also can't let it slide that a film involving higher education has a spelling error in the first listed scene on Amazon. The studio credits are spelled Studio credits.
How do you know that's not French?
Because context. Because the rest of them aren't in French.
Maybe that's credits is French, maybe. Maybe that's a French word as well.
I'm gonna say no. Occam's razor says no. We open to a black and white recollection of New York City circa 1940 with young Thornton Mellon, for now played by Jason Hervey, the little brat actor from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. It's winter, and he carries his school books into his father's tailoring and dry cleaning shop. He presents a mediocre report card to his father, who admonishes him to work harder and go to college. Thornton doesn't want that. He'd rather work in the store with his father. His father tells him that it doesn't matter how rich or successful a man is, that without an education, it means nothing. Then he tells his son that he can do anything he wants, invalidating everything else that he just said.
Also, I don't know. Does this film sort of undermine the idea that a man needs to be educated to be successful? Or no matter
It absolutely undermines that idea, Joe.
Because he looks like he's doing pretty well with all that money and no education. I guess technically he learns, but does he really?
Then it's a black and white credits montage until Thornton is an adult, showing brief shots of living a happy home life. Then we get the commercial for what makes adult Thornton the wealthy man that he is. His tall and fat clothing store, and the custom lines of clothing for people fitting those descriptors.
Are you fat? When you go jogging, you leave potholes? When you make love, do you have to give directions? At the zoo, do elephants throw you peanuts? Do you look at a menu and say, okay? Well, now you can eat all you want, because at Thornton Mellon's tall and fat stores, we've got you covered. That's right, fine woolen, and woolen blend suits and sport coats in all the larger sizes. Husky, stout, extra stout, and the new Hindenburg line. And for you ladies, we have caftans, muumuus, and our own exclusive A-frame in all colors and patterns. Yes, we have miles and miles of fabric. So take it from me, Thornton Mellon. If you want to look thin, you hang out with fat people.
Thornton Mellon's Tall and Fat, 150 locations across America.
Thornton was watching that in the back of his limo, driven by Lou, on their way to his company headquarters.
Now, George.
Yes, Joe.
This is an 86 movie, and we're in 2022. Do you think he could get away with those fat jokes?
On TV?
Anywhere.
Yeah, Fox News. Or Fox.
Fox News does fat jokes?
There are plenty of havens for the, quote, politically incorrect that he could get away with that. He could sell his shit wherever the fucking MyPillow guy sells his shit. Wait, he doesn't really sell his shit. And he got his phone confiscated by the FBI when he was in the drive-thru at a fast food joint.
All right, let's not get into MyPillow's realities. We're talking about this movie. No, I was actually saying, but I see what you're saying. Yeah, he could be able to cut his ads on Fox News, places like that. I guess so. That's an interesting thought.
But no, mainstream, no, he would not be getting customers that way. We have the big and tall stores. Those exist.
But we don't insult the customers.
Exactly. Like, they don't go out of their way to insult customers. That's why they're still in business. Although, there is an interpretation you could take. Well, no, he shoots that interpretation in the foot at the end. Like, you could say he's actually just trying to help out the big people and sort of haha, but then he says if you want to look thin, you hang out with fat people.
That's why I hang out with you.
I could say the same thing, Joe. Neither of us are svelte examples of lithe framedness.
I'm in so much better shape than you.
I didn't say that's not true. He walks in and calls someone who is definitely not Senator Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, and then tells his secretary to hold some of his calls. I don't know why he called that woman Pocahontas, and I get the sum of my calls joke. I'm only pointing these two out so I can say this. If I write down every quip, smartass remark, retort, or joke, this summary will never end, so I'm not gonna do that. And that's more a promise to myself than to the audience.
Yeah, the character, without a question, is Rodney Dangerfield doing a stand-up act.
Mm-hmm.
But as a character, who could work with this man? He'd just be insulting them every 5 minutes. It'd be like working with Groucho Marx. Groucho was and the Marx.
I know who the Marx
famous.
Who Groucho Marx was.
Okay, just making sure.
Well, here's how people can keep working there, Joe. The boardroom where his executives have gathered is being fully catered. Everyone at the table is fatter than Thornton. He makes one financial decision to establish for us, the audience, that, yeah, he didn't graduate college or even high school, but he casually uses terms like depreciation and capital gains, so he obviously didn't need to. After greenlighting a product to compete with Cabbage Patch Kids, without going the route of Garbage Pail Kids, and if you get that reference, your back hurts, he gets a call from his son, Jason, who is away at college. Thornton clears the boardroom, despite objections that they have a very long agenda to deal with, to establish, again, for us the audience, that he takes his fatherhood role seriously. Well, as seriously as a character played by Rodney Dangerfield can. On that call, Jason makes it out like he's enjoying his college experience. in a fraternity and busy practicing for diving competitions. The reality is that he's not in a frat, his grades are lousy, and he's the towel boy for the dive team. Thornton wants to see him. Obviously, Jason can't have his dad showing up there and blowing all his lies up in his face. We also learn that Jason doesn't have a good relationship with Thornton's wife, who is not Jason's dead mother, so coming back home isn't an option either. As the phone call ends, Chaz shows up to be the absolute asshole we would expect him to be. Just based on his name. Like, take out the fact that he's played by William Zabka. His name is fucking Chaz.
You know, well, William was tired of playing heavies, and he didn't realize he was being typecast until he was doing his picture. So he thought, it was a comedy, so I'll be a funny guy. And apparently he, at least according to what I read, he did some takes that were very humorous, but the director went to him, no, you got to be an asshole. You can't be the one who's funny here.
Wow, poor William Zabka. The Thorntons are throwing a big old party at their home today, so we get to meet Thornton's wife, Vanessa, who doesn't have a thing to wear and doesn't want Thornton to embarrass her. She really is written to be an unlovable shrew, begging the question of how hard she had to pretend at humanity to land Thornton. I mean, he's ostensibly an intelligent guy, and while she's pretty, she's also rather severe looking and not so pretty as to make up for having the personality of a particularly ornery miniature Doberman.
Well, remember, she's much younger than him, so maybe that's part of it.
And of course, he can't help but embarrass her at the party, being a man and all, what with him having an appetite.
I hate small food, you know.
And having no filter.
Yeah, if that dress had pockets, you'd look like a pool table. You should try my tall and fat stores. No offense.
And objecting to literally walking in on his wife and the emergency medical hologram from Voyager sucking face again.
Mr. Mellon, your wife was just showing us her Klimt.
You too, huh? She's showing it to everybody.
No, was that? I didn't even realize it. Was that the dude from Voyager? I didn't even recognize him.
Yeah, he was the EMH. He was the doctor.
On Voyager, right, but not...
Yeah.
There's a movie he's not playing the doctor. I was confused there for a second. All right, yes. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, he was making out with the wife. Okay, didn't recognize him. Do you think the producers saw this movie and say, hey, we'll cast these two minor characters into our TV show?
Maybe. It's the final straw, and Thornton is ready for it. He had divorce papers all drawn up in his pocket, along with plenty of Polaroid photographic evidence of her dalliances, so she is not going to be able to take him to the proverbial cleaners. And with that, she's out of his life, the movie, and this summary.
As if divorce could be that easy, even if it is rich.
It's not easy, but sometimes the not easy is just the fucking waiting.
Yeah, I mean, he just would not have been divorced that quickly.
I'm just giving a 1,000-yard stare right now. With Lou lounging beside the pool and Thornton taking a relaxing post-breakup swim, the movie decides that he has nothing better to do than to visit his son. So that's what happens.
This is the first time we actually see him swim. And I understand some of those shots are Rodney Dangerfield. And I know apparently he really did do swimming when he was a much younger man. But I don't know.
I'll mention something along those lines much later in the summary.
Alrighty.
Of course, this being the 80s, Thornton is cosmically obligated to walk into a sorority house so we can see the tits of a showering student.
Jason, where are you? Hey, I need some help here. Hey, buddy, I'm talking to you. I need some help here. Oh, take it easy, honey. I didn't see a thing. You're perfect.
I was going to try to give Thornton a really lenient read just to contrast it with how it actually is, but that lenient read would have wrongly required that him pulling aside the shower curtain, even if it was a fraternity, would have been okay. Him going back for seconds, even to leave a compliment, just makes it more of a sex crime.
Also, who goes into a shower, into a bathroom, that, I need some help. Hey, person in the shower. Let me pull back the curtain. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And that woman would have said something. She's like, get out of here. This is the woman's room or something. She was just like, oh, I can't say anything.
Mm-hmm. Does the movie think so? The movie doesn't even rise to the level of the lenient read I tried to give. The cop just lets him off because anyone could make that mistake. I want to be clear here. That wasn't a mistake. It was sexual harassment for laughs.
Also, if you think about it, we also witness a bribe for laughs of the cop.
Well, the funny thing is it's not even a bribe because he gives him the money after the cop already lets him off.
That's true.
Because one thing about the character is he likes to give money away. He likes to spend money on people. It's not the worst quality to have in a super rich person. At least that puts money back into the fucking circulation, you know? Then we see Jason talking with Derek, who... he's not actually important to the plot, so I'm not even sure I need to flesh him out any more than I did in the character intros. I'll just play one sound clip emblematic of everything that comes out of his mouth, and that should suffice.
Thanks. See, it's this whole stupid capitalist system, you know? I mean, it's set up to heap rewards on the advantage and the aggressive, and just like to make sure that like two regular schmoes like you and me never get a date with girls like Valerie Desmond. I hate the whole bourgeois mentality of the school.
Basically, he's what conservatives think liberals are.
Also, the weird thing about that conversation, him hating the capitalist system, once Rodney Dangerfield shows up and spends all this money, he does not complain once.
Well, he could see that as socialism.
Oh, could he now?
Dangerfield is a father. He is part of the authority. He is part of the government, and therefore the authority is providing the services to...
He's literally buying his way through the school, something everybody mentions throughout the film. That's not socialism.
I'm just talking about how a disaffected college student can rationalize a rich person spending money on them personally.
He's very much like Liza Minnelli was in The Cabaret.
Yeah.
Despite him saying, the capitalist system, when he actually sees stuff, he says nothing.
Yep. Their conversation is driven by Jason bemoaning the results of his own lack of effort, and both of them commiserating on how much it sucks not to be having sex with Valerie right at that moment and every moment before or after.
Oh boy, why would this one be interested in these two guys who don't even have the guts to talk to her? Women don't find that attractive. I don't know if people understand this.
Well, Jason does. We'll get there. We'll get there in a second.
Yeah, we get there and then we don't. But anyway, we'll get into it.
The two are dorm mates, so they can both be surprised when they walk in and find Thornton and Lou there. It's not long before Thornton is brought up to speed on how not great things have been. Realizing that he's kind of a hypocrite for demanding his son succeed at college when he himself didn't have to, Thornton has the bright idea that it's about time he himself finally did. At this point, Jason is all for it. If you remember from earlier in the summary, Thornton didn't graduate high school. He didn't get a GED because I don't think they existed back then.
Back when in the 40s, you're saying?
Yeah, when he would have been going to school.
That probably would have been the 50s then. But yeah, I think you may be right. I don't know.
So according to Dean Martin, whose very character title and name is a joke reference to the mid-century king of cool, Thornton's got nothing going for him, or to offer the school for him to be admitted. Well, except for what's in his bank account, which is apparently just fine.
Quick question. Do you even know who Dean Martin is? We've discussed him on the show, actually.
He's a mid-century comedian, singer, actor, musician type.
And who was he famous for hanging out with? What was his group?
The Rat Pack.
Hey! I taught you something.
A donation large enough to create the Mellon School of Business Administration assures him a spot in the freshman class. The fact that this is an extant phenomenon is part of why higher education is a joke in this country, because anyone with rich enough parents can buy their way through whatever program they want and become the next idiot in charge of something that they have no business being in charge of.
David, I just want to get it on record that I am totally against this. I don't think that selling admission to an obviously unqualified student is very ethical or honorable.
That's Philip, dean of the business school, and I'm with him on this.
The only thing is, it's very strange that Philip seems to have ethics, and yet he allows Thornton, or Rodney Dangerfield's character, to remain in his class. Which, if that was in real ethics, to be like, listen, not only do you know I don't like you, but you and I are about to be seeing the same woman. You really shouldn't be in my class because that could be seen as a bias towards you.
Yeah, well, I don't think this movie's too concerned with the details, Joe.
Yeah, I noticed that.
During class signups, Jason manages to start a conversation with Valerie. See? It happens.
Yeah, that was... All right.
Of course, Chaz has to show up and be a dick. Thornton decides to basically sign up for everything that Jason does after using a fake Springsteen concert scheme to empty the lines for class signups. Then they go supply shopping, and Thornton spends like there's no tomorrow. He even gets for himself, his son, and his son's sidekick an apartment big enough for a sitcom set in Manhattan. Everyone's having a great time.
I mean, it definitely sets it up as an apartment, but that's a dorm. He just basically refigured a dorm that already existed.
Okay. Tomato.
Which raises the question, like, so when he leaves, I assume the school now owns that.
Yeah, one would think.
Not that he would care. He's just giving away money anyway, so why would it matter to him?
Mm-hmm.
His taxes must be like Trump's. He does not pay any.
Now classes start. First, economics, with Philip as the professor. Thornton does what I do in classes, but goes way above and beyond my utility or appropriateness. I am compelled to point out problems or errors in class. I have never in my adult life been chastised or seen as a nuisance by teachers or my fellow students for doing so, because I do it out of a sincere concern for accuracy and comprehension, with an understanding that I am interrupting a flow and enough respect to make sure I don't derail the entire class.
I noticed you said in your adult life.
I don't think I did that as a child.
Okay. It's odd that you put that in there then.
I've been an adult for way longer than I was a child.
All you had to say is, I've never in my life been in a class where blah, 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 blah. The fact that you put out this adult life makes you think, he's kind of an asshole in school like that. When he was in high school or maybe elementary school.
Maybe I was. Thornton does it to make himself look good at the expense of Philip. Philip is teaching a 101 level class here, and Thornton is pretending that his multi-decades of experience entitle him to disrupt the learning of the 101 concepts. The students don't know enough to know that this is a disservice to them. Philip is doing his best to respect his student, the other students, and to keep his composure when an obviously unqualified student with an apparent disdain for actual education starts strutting like he owns the place.
Oh, it sounds like you really do like Philip more than Thornton Mellon.
Look, Philip isn't wrong in this. He comes off as an asshole, but he's just British. Next is a history class taught by a Vietnam veteran with an obvious and pronounced case of PTSD. I won't dwell on this except to say that the university should have benefits for professors that are enough for them to get counseling. And of course I think that, because I think that healthcare should be a right, free at the point of service, and that if it has to come from employers, then employers would be providing the best or at least adequate for their workers.
Vietnam veteran teacher. That, of course, is Sam Kinison. Do you know who Sam Kinison is?
I know that he got this part because Rodney Dangerfield was vetting him, was pushing for him.
Yeah, he was a comic and Rodney liked him.
Rodney actually did a lot of things like that for startup comics.
Sure. Would you believe a person who thought his career was kind of on the was going down, and he saw Sam Kinison and wow, this guy's fantastic. I really need to up my game. You know who said that?
You?
George Carlin. George Carlin, who is now remembered as one of the greatest comics ever, saw Sam Kinison, someone I don't think people remember as well, and said, that guy's fantastic. I really got to be so much better.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you never know who your influence is going to be. We probably influenced millions and millions of critics just doing this podcast, George.
I don't think we've influenced millions of anything, Joe.
Well, fuck you then.
We know the numbers. We can see the download numbers. It hasn't been millions. We've only been downloaded 20,000 times or so. We've inconvenienced trillions of electrons. So far, so good. Thornton is enjoying himself. Next up is literature, taught by the OG Hot Lips Houlihan herself. Diane breezes into the classroom and, from her podium, delivers an erotic reading from James Joyce's Ulysses. Thornton is insta-smitten. Diane isn't exactly looking away either, but she's already dating Philip, so there's a complication. One could be forgiven, though, for wondering why they're together, since he's about as rigid and tense a fellow as one can be without complimenting his genitals, while she's more of a free-flowing spirit of literary metaphor.
Yeah, you know this was a relationship created by the script, because those two would not be dating.
She wouldn't date either of these.
I think that's true. That's true of most women in movies, as we've gone over.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need either of these guys, honey. You're so much better than both of them.
Next are tryouts for the diving team. This is where I start to just absolutely despise Jason. Apparently, like his father, he is an amazing diver. However, during the last tryouts, he just wasn't any good. Why? Did he need his dad there to push him on? That's not how anything works. That's how medication for ADD works. The diving coach and Thornton commiserate over shared experiences. For instance, the coach grew up around the Atlantic City steel piers, while Thornton was a diver in the water show they had there. Thornton was legendary for his triple Lindy dive. That'll come back later, and will be more ridiculous than I had guessed.
Just out of curiosity, what was your initial guess was going to happen?
I honestly thought it had something to do with a Lindy hop.
Well, that's actually understandable.
Yeah. We have to develop the secondary love story, so we go to the library. I will not dignify this with any comment but this. I find it patently offensive and absurd that the Trill to eventually be joined with the Dax symbiont would need Jason fucking Mellon's help with her astronomy homework. Here, about halfway through the film, we can see the cracks start forming between Thornton and Jason, because Chaz isn't enough of a character on his own to generate a conflict to form a plot around. Thornton is supposed to meet his son to study. Instead, he ends up in a bar where he gets up on stage to sing Twist and Shout with the band, simultaneously hitting on every woman in that bar with those bug eyes of his.
Isn't it weird that no woman at any point says to him, you know, you're old enough to be my grandfather?
And ugly. You're old and ugly. You're old and you look like that scene in Total Recall when the helmets get busted.
Yeah, Rodney was pretty ugly. Actually, weirdly enough, uglier than Robin Williams, if you can believe it.
I can believe it, Joe. I know what these men look like. Jason, with a little help from Derek, finds him there. Before they can have a real conversation about that, the jocks walk in, covered in paint, because Derek was doing some protest thing, and it's about to get hairy until Thornton calls in Lou to dispense some of that Balboa justice. Or something. I don't know. It's a bar fight.
We know this is a comedy, so there are no consequences to this thing. But if a student, or a student's adjacent, whatever Lou is supposed to be, I don't know how he's on campus, but he is, beats up a bunch of students, and there's a fight, even if it's off-campus bar, the school hears about it. Because these students, all those jocks have parents, and they're not paying good money to have the kids beat up in a bar. So they want to know why the child was assaulted, and then assaulted by who? Lou, who isn't even a student there.
At least everybody's an adult. This wouldn't happen with high school kids.
Well, no. Even if they're adults, it's still college age. And,
yeah, no. I get you're not wrong, Joe.
And ostensibly, they're not paying for this. So, there's just no way this would happen. And let's just move on.
It becomes clear that Thornton doesn't actually enjoy college very much. So he starts throwing dollars at the problem. He has his secretary take notes in his economics class. He has the Rand Corporation work out his science homework. And he even has Kurt Vonnegut Jr. himself come to help him write his literature paper.
Have you ever read any Kurt Vonnegut?
I used to know a couple of quotes from Vonnegut.
That doesn't count. I read Vonnegut. He's okay. I don't know why people are so in love with his work. I mean, it's certainly better writer than I'll ever be. But, it just wasn't that great.
Thornton does like Diane, who likes him back, and she even blows off dinner with Philip to hang out with him. She regrets that just a little bit later when she finds him in a hot tub with a handful of co-eds, but her disappointment won't last long. Jason isn't really happy with how his dad is dealing with the academic side of things, and even refuses to have that help for himself. His final straw is a bit of bullshit. Chaz tells him that he only made the diving team because his dad paid off the coach. Instead of asking the coach or even asking his father, he just wholesale accepts the word of the guy being played by William Zabka. Jason will even sucker punch Chaz right in the kisser before he questions that lie.
That also would have just ended there. He would have come back and punched him. I mean, it's Chaz just falls over and that's the end of it. Dan.
He would have come back in, no mercy.
Right, they would have had a competition in front of people.
Exactly. Moreover, Thornton is in trouble with the school, and of course, Philip is leading the charge, accusing him of plagiarism. Thornton will be subjected to a comprehensive oral examination conducted by all of Mr. Mellon's professors. Basically, what I had to do for every watch station I qualified in the Navy for my senior title as an electrical technician, and what I'll have to do after my presentation at the end of my Tools for Employees Advancing into Management program.
What? I mean, that's a thing where you just sit there and they ask you a bunch of questions, you answer it?
They'll ask me questions about what I present on, but yeah, it'll be a board of people asking me a bunch of questions.
Well, no, I'm sorry. No, I understand about your presentation. Of course they're going to ask you about that. I meant for your electrical technician thing. Was that something you sat in a room and a bunch of people just asked you questions?
I had to do a practical examination.
Meaning what?
Meaning I had to demonstrate a bunch of skills while I talked through them.
Ah, okay. So you had a device in front of you or something?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Multiple. Many.
That actually makes a bit of sense.
Yeah. There was one where I had to wire up an entire circuit based on drawings that I was handed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing it and I'm like, this isn't going to work. This circuit does not work as it's drawn. I can put this together. It's not going to work. For it to work, you have to do this. And he's like, nobody ever catches that.
Huh.
You're not supposed to catch that there. So make it work, and then I have to break something in it for you to come back to after the break, and then you have to troubleshoot it.
Oh, cool.
I was good at my job. As he's finding this out, Lou is having a chat with Jason, telling him that his father never lies to him, and that if he got onto the diving team, it was because he earned it. So as easy as it was to convince him that his father was a dick, it's just as easy to deconvince him. Guy is a ping pong ball. So now Jason, Derek, and Diane are all on board with filling Thornton with whatever he needs to pass that oral board. And that means a montage. Then it's the board. Even though he's exhausted, he apparently knows enough. He passes. I'm sure I could have made that sound more interesting, but this summary is going on long enough and we still have to deal with the triple Lindy. Across campus, at the diving competition, Lou and Derek are there to cheer for Jason, who dives just fucking fine. His dad even makes it there in time to see it. Disaster strikes in the form of Chaz getting a cramp, so they need a diver to take his spot.
Even at the time I saw this film in 1986, and now, I wasn't entirely certain. Do you think Chaz is faking cramps, or did he really get a cramp?
I think he would have had to have really gotten a cramp. I don't think he would have faked it. I don't think he would have thrown his team under the bus like that. Why would he have faked it?
I don't know, and yet the way it's shot to me, it could be read either way. Because the way he's going up the stairs, suddenly he's like, oh, suddenly I have this cramp. And it feels like he's faking it, but at the same time, he never actually says it. It's never actually revealed that he's faking it, so it's not clear. It's ambiguous to me.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of cramps just fucking happen. And he got one, and it's dangerous to dive with a cramp.
The reason he might have thrown us under the bus, because he doesn't want his team to win, because he doesn't want what's-his-face to win. But that ultimately would make no sense.
Yeah, it wouldn't. I think we have to just accept that it's a cramp because there's no reason for it not to be.
I'd be curious, listeners, if you've seen the film, tell us what you think. Do you think he was really cramping, or was he just being a dick?
Geez, next thing you know, you'll be telling me that the moon landing wasn't real. God.
There was a movie about the moon landing not being real.
If you believe they put a man on the moon.
Man on the moon.
The diving coach lies and says that Thornton is a legit backup diver. The faculty adds an additional springboard for Thornton's triple Lindy. That's Rodney Dangerfield's stunt doubles and camera crew making it look like he jumps from the cement highboard to a lower springboard, flipping to another springboard, flipping to another springboard, then flipping on that last springboard before flipping off of that last springboard.
Now, when I first saw this, I loved this. Now looking back at it, I got what a dicky thing for the coach to do. What if he'd failed? I mean, look, the man hasn't. He totally said that he hasn't done this in years because it nearly killed him. He doesn't even teach his son how to do it, so he would obviously be rusty from it. Like, what if the thing had gone down in flames?
It would have been a much better end to the movie, Joe. Diane saw all that and was there to let Thornton know that he passed his board. Everyone's happy. Diane and Thornton kiss. Valerie and Jason kiss. Philip is probably jerking off in the toilet somewhere. And Chaz is probably in the locker room rubbing his cramping leg, wishing that he had a Mr. Miyagi to do the hand clappy rubby thing. Finally, Thornton, again, because he gave the school a boatload of money, is giving the lamest commencement speech ever. Like, Andy's speech from the last episode of The Office was so much better. It was so bad that nobody even thought to include it in the quotes section on IMDb for this film.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dean Martin, President Sinclair, and members of the graduating class. I have only one thing to say to you today. It's a jungle out there. You got to look out for number one, but don't step in number two. And so, to all you graduates, as you go out into the world, my advice to you is, don't go. It's rough out there. Move back with your parents. Let them worry about it.
Okay, that might have been the most prescient graduation message to come out of the 80s, given the way the housing and employment markets have been since. Whatever, the end.
You know, as bad as Thornton and Diane, I could certainly appreciate their hookup or their relationship way, way more than I do with the son character and that woman.
Jason and Valerie.
Thank you, Jason and Valerie. So, number one, and I know this is silly. This shouldn't matter. But I was surprised they actually never did anything than just the heights. She towers over him. But that's irrelevant, right? That's just a physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's boring. Why would she be attracted to him? And they even say they love each other at the end of the film, if you recall. She said, I've always loved you. She says, oh, I love you too. From what?
Yeah, hand jerking off motion. Like, bullshit, come on.
What love? You barely know each other. You barely talk to this girl. What's there to love about him? You're right. He's really wussy. Gives up very easily. Just needs his dad around to have any sort of confidence. What the fuck is that?
So I'm just going to go into my conclusions.
Okay.
Normally, comedies can get away with shit because they're comedies, because they're not supposed to be taken seriously. This one strains the bounds of my suspension of disbelief as far as relationships goes. The jokes are dated. They don't hold up very well. And I don't think this one still works. I don't think it's the worst of not still working, but I think it can be forgotten and it wouldn't matter to the world at all if nobody ever saw this movie again.
You know, as I was watching this, and again, I saw this originally when I was in college, actually, and I thought it was very, very funny. But as I was watching it as a 55-year-old, I was thinking, I wonder what George is going to feel about this, because some of this still appeals to me, but again, it appeals to me because I saw it years ago, and this is from my background, this is from my life.
Yeah, it's got nostalgia going for it.
Yeah. Exactly. It's history. But I wonder how someone younger, not there for all that time, not understanding I shouldn't even say not understanding, not there for the context of these jokes, because today it just seems like some of the stuff Rodney says is just mean. It's not even like I was just funny to anybody. He's being insulting to everyone. So, having said that, I'm going to agree with you. I don't think this still works. I think it works for an old fart like me, nostalgia. But seriously, in 2022, yeah, there's a lot in here that doesn't make any sense. I think probably the only thing that probably still works, even though you thought it was a lame commencement speech, what he says in it.
Yeah, that was it accidentally still works. But you have to interpret it from it's too expensive to live anywhere now.
All right, well, that's it, everybody. We didn't think it works. Let us know if you disagree.
Yeah.
This was a Patron's Choice episode, and the poll for next month's film is already up on Patreon. The choices are 10 from 1979, Splash from 1984, and Runaway Bride from 1999.
That's the one with Steve Martin in it, right?
No. Runaway Bride is Richard Gere and Julia Roberts.
Gotcha, yeah. Again, those two. All right.
And those two, again, reunited because it feels so good.
Mm-hmm. Our next episode is a Patron's Choice episode. TV Guide tier patron Aaron has made his choice for this year, and he's chosen All the Pieces of Flair That Are Office Space from 1999. You, too, can pick what we watch by becoming a patron at patreon.com/DTSWpod.
Also, patrons who can vote, please vote in every election, even the ones for this podcast.
Agreed.
So I guess that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening, and vote blue.
And I'm George Romacka. Thanks for listening indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
What else?
The toy division has come up with a new doll idea to go along with our children's clothing line. We call them Melon Patch Kids. Now, the competition exploits the notion that their dolls are orphans. The Melon Patch Kids are not orphans. They're abandoned. We think it's a winner.
Okay, go with it. But keep the unit cost under $5. And last year we took a bath in those chubby tubby tub toys.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romacka, who can be reached by the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.